That's all I got to say about that.
That's all I got to say about it. You can see me typing madly in the background. I was
Yeah,
experimenting this morning with a new terrain layout thing, and I just about had it working, and then, of course, something popped up. So.
all right. Well, does anybody, you guys want to talk about anything else, or do we want to go ahead and move on to the desktop stuff?
I think we can move on. I don't have anything. I was going to make an announcement this week. Actually, I'll make a partial announcement.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So I was going to unveil some games that I'm working on, but I'm going to hold off a little bit. And the reason is because they're not done. And the reason they're not done is because I switched my modus about the way I was approaching them. Long story short, I can just get to it. Is Sergey made a great suggestion several episodes back when we started this series, where we were talking about how we were going to lay out the desktop game and build the levels and stuff. And he suggested that I use Tile, and he forwarded me some code that he'd written. And I looked at it briefly, but as is par for the course for me, I don't generally have a lot of time to learn new things and do all the other stuff I'm supposed to be doing. But I finally got around to it this weekend, and I was very happily surprised. And I say that in a positive way because Tile's been around for a while, and so it's definitely one thing that's really nice is it's continually updated. Like I got the latest binary was just built 2 or 3 days ago, so the guy's doing updates even yet. But I was able to quickly learn how to use it, sort of get back up to speed on it, and use it to lay out some test levels using the same kind of structure that we use here. We've been using for these games, where we have, for example, in our last game, we used makers or builders, which were little pieces of code that would make an object and then place it in a certain position based on what we'd specified in our editor. So I basically co-opted that code, and then I used Tiled as the source of the layout rules and the layout locations, and it just works. So I was really happy with that because one of the things that was a little bit confusing, not confusing, but worrisome for me is when you're dealing with a editor, one of the things you need is the ability to specify arbitrary data about things that you're laying out. So, for example, you want to lay out a turret, or you want to lay out an enemy, and you want to give it, Sergey's here, and you want to give it some additional details so your code can do the right thing and build the right turret or build the right enemy. If your editor doesn't let you do that, then your only choice is to go write your own editor or to get tricky. So what we're talking about here, Sergey, is I'm just giving some kudos to you for your suggestion on Tiled. I finally picked up Tiled again this last weekend and got it started using it to lay out some level content and whatnot. I'm still working through some details, but it's quite functional and easy to use. So I think what we'll do is when we go on to our next game, we'll definitely use Tiled to do the layout, and we'll show what I've learned and some of the stuff I got from Sergey as far as like how he uses it, and or what I was able to pull out of how he uses it. And I think we'll encourage people to use it from here on because it's free. You can give a little bit of money in a Patreon if you want to, and it's a very powerful tool. So
I'm looking forward to that because I think tiling is definitely one of those things that people, like we've always said before, when you see it, you're like, ooh, how did they do that?
Oh, we lost Sergey. He dropped. I guess he just wanted to get his kudos and then he's out of here. Oh, we clicked the wrong button.
There he is.
He's back.
He's back.
All right.
Hey, I want to throw in one last thing. You did a great job of transitioning to today's topic, but I just want to encourage everybody to definitely check out the show notes for today's show. They're going to put a link to all of the PERC announcement resources, and one of the things that you should take into consideration is that PERC is a public company, which means that they are traded on the Canadian stock market, and they have to reveal things to their investors. So it's not like a black box where you sort of say, well, I don't really know what's going on with that company. They've got, they posted all their last quarter earnings, and it was super positive. Is the untechnical analysis of that.
I like that.
So go check it out. Check the show notes. Follow the links.
All right, I'm getting ready to share my desktop as I come along here. So just
Now,
say something interesting while I get mine
while
together.
while you're doing that, I'll remind everybody that they can download the source code for this. It's been available all along, and so you can download everything. I would encourage you, if you're kind of joining in the middle of the conversation, to go back to the previous Hangouts, which there is a playlist now for this series, and you can kind of pick up at the early stages of the conversation and see the code being built up over time. So if you kind of jump right in the middle and if something's confusing, then go back and look for that specific video where we maybe talked about mouse controls, or where we talked about moving players, or creating cameras, or any of those pieces that might be tripping you up a little bit.
All right, I'm ready to talk and hopefully make sense. Those two can go together.
That is a T-shirt that I should wear.
Ready to talk and hopefully make sense. All right, so last week I was trying to demonstrate the concept of shooting, and I was trying to break down the steps, and I got too fancy for my pants, and it didn't work on the show. And then an hour later, after the show, not trying to do 10 things at once and watch Charles do a little dance in the background there. I saw that, Charles.
That's my fancy pants dance.
Yeah, your fancy pants dance. Isn't that a game? But anyways, I got it working. And in a nutshell, what you're going to see if you have downloaded it in the last week, or if you look at it today, is you'll run the game, and you'll see the physics bodies, first of all. I turn that on, so now whenever anything's got a physics body, you'll see it. And I'm just using all circular physics bodies. Hopefully you can see this. Yeah, I think so. And let me reload it. And then when I fire, you're going to see, first you'll see a little yellow line. It's already gone now. And then a moment later, there'll be a red line. And the purpose of this was to demonstrate the yellow line is the vector that represents this angle right here, 103 degrees. That's our facing, our aiming vector. So we're going to be aiming at 103 degrees, where for me, 0 is straight up and down, not to the right. And then it goes around clockwise. So 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270 degrees, back to 360, and so on. And then a moment later, what occurs, this is debug code, is it removes that line, the yellow one, and creates a new one, which represents the velocity vector of the arrow, which you can see under the reticle here. Let me do a little better job here of capturing that. And there it is. So we got our arrow flying. It's got its little body. Like I said, the body is between the graphics. It's centered on the graphics. I said this last week. And this red line represents both the direction that the arrow is moving and the magnitude of the velocity. So I set the velocity. Part of the reason this was malfunctioning last week, because it wasn't malfunctioning. I was using a very high velocity vector, and I couldn't figure out why the red was always off the screen. That is, this was very long, and the reason it was so long is because my velocity magnitude was like 500, and the measurement of this screen is 960 by 640. So the only time I'd ever be able to see it is if I was pointing up at the corner. So even now, if I run this and I shoot like upward, okay, yeah, I made it short enough so you can always see it. This is only 300 pixels long now, I believe, or maybe 200. So but the point of this is that if you wanted to walk through the code that we looked at last week, you can do so. Let me just let me locate it real quickly here. Player maker, arrow vision, and the keyword you are looking for is do debug. It's going to be in the player maker. And if you just walk through do debug, all of this code right here, you make it a little bit smaller so I can select it. All of this code is the same as this code here, but this little shorter bit has no debug code in it. It doesn't draw any vectors. It doesn't do anything special. So if do debug, stupid name now that I have to say it several times, is set to false, it just executes the short version of this code, and you don't see any output. So the purpose of this is just to allow you to step through the same code and kind of see what happens step by step by step.